and welcome back to another month. Today we are starting our project for February, and this is what we're going to be doing this month. These turn out really cool. They're really individualized because you can pick your colors and your designs, and they're actually called Zentangle hands. So what you'll need for this project this month, let me put this up here. We'll actually be doing a larger one. This is just kind of a completed colored one. But you can do these. What you're going to need is you're going to need a large piece of paper. That's what I'll be working with. I'll be working with a piece of paper about this size here. However, if you have paper at home like computer paper or cardstock, you could really work from any size, but you probably want to start with a white sheet of paper because we're going to be coloring. You will need a pencil or an eraser, pencil and an eraser to trace your hand. You will need a black marker or a black Sharpie. For today's presentation, I actually will be using Sharpie markers. They're really bright and vivid. However, Sharpie markers, you know, if you've played with them, they can be a little bit more expensive. So this works perfectly fine if you have Crayola markers or just some school markers. You can even use colored pencils or crayons. Anything that you can use with color would be fine. But you definitely need at least one black marker to outline your pencil and to outline your patterns for this one. You do not need this, but something that I have included just as a resource to you because we're talking about working with the library here, is there's always really good resources at your library. And Zentangle is actually artistic lines that people have drawn. This is just my book right here, but if you look up Zentangle, they will give you all sorts of demonstrations and step-by-steps of how to do lots of different kinds of designs. So if if you're racking your brain and you have trouble thinking of your own different designs, you can always refer to books like Zentangle or line designs or even pattern, because lines repeated are patterns, to give you ideas for different ideas. And you can get as simple or as complex as you choose to. The more detail you put in there, the sharper they really get. So you can do that online, or you can do that through the library, but you can look up Zentangle lines, or you can even look up just pattern sheets, and either one of those could be a resource to you if you need that. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to take my sheet of paper here, and I'm going to trace my hand with a pencil. So I'm going to just put my hand now, putting designs both in the middle of the paper and off the paper looks best, so you don't just have floating items, and you've probably heard that from your art teacher at one time or another. But I'm going to start off by just tracing my hand here. And you can do all sorts of ideas. You can go with this, just like you've done in class before where you've traced a handprint. No big deal, everybody can do this. If you want it to go off the paper, you can extend it, just like this would be your wrist, right? You can extend it off the paper and then just erase those lines. I like to go off the paper myself, like I was talking about. You don't have to have a complete hand. So, you could even do like a peace sign or something, partially off the paper. You don't have to do just a handprint. You can do a peace sign. So you can do as many or as few as you choose to do. If you want to get really creative, you can, instead of tracing your hand, you can make like paw prints or something. You can do something mock. It doesn't have to be handprints, but that's what we're doing for this one right here. So the next step that you're going to do is you're going to start thinking about patterns. And the way that I do this with mine is I usually will take my pencil and I will kind of make boundary lines on my hand. And they can be the fingers, they can extend the fingers, kind of just anything you want. I'm just kind of making what I call boundary lines. They can be curved, they can be straight. So you can see how I just kind of made separation lines. And kind of from afar, I mean, it kind of looks like muscles or something. It's not, but that's kind of what it looks like, how your muscles will look under your skin. But so you'll do the same thing to all the hands that you have on there. Okay, so you see how I'm making my boundary lines. These are just lines that basically will tape in a certain section so that you can start creating patterns. So, step 3, now that you've done your hands, you've done your boundaries, now you're going to fill in each of those with as many different patterns as you can think of. They can be very minimal, they can be complex. So if you take a look at the ones that I used on this one, I used wavy lines. We all know that there's lines, all sorts of lines. Wavy lines, diagonal lines, zigzag, crisscross, checkerboard. I even did polka dots. So anything that comes to mind that you can do, and it can be any direction, it doesn't have to be all the same direction. So I'm going to just start with wavy lines. Okay, so you see how I filled in one boundary area with repeating. Now one thing you do want to do is a pattern is repetition, it repeats. So you want to keep with the same line. Whatever you choose to go within that boundary, you want to keep that same thing. Let's go with dots, okay? Again, dots can go off the side here. They don't have to be full dots in the area. Okay. There's my area with dots. I'm going to do crisscross now in one of the fingers. I guess that'd be my pinky finger. I'm going to do crisscross lines here. And this is how you can, this is what I'm talking about. You can get as detailed or as simple as you want. These are just simple designs that we have done. Some people have themes. I've done these projects before with some of my students. And what they'll do is they'll come up with an actual theme for theirs. So for instance, I had one girl who did like a Disney theme. And so her theme was Winnie the Pooh, and in each boundary area, the overall theme was Winnie the Pooh, but she did repeating patterns. She thought of patterns that had to do with Winnie the Pooh. So like one area was all repetition of honey pots. Another one was like stripes for Tigger's tail. So, and then when you color them accordingly, you can see how they could all come together. So you can do, there's so many different ways that you can do this. I'm going to go ahead and do zigzag lines now. And a lot of this comes down to the coloring part too. So when you're doing, when you color it, you can make it look bold, or you can use pastel colors. You can use complementary colors to make it pop. Complementary colors are ones that people usually tend to forget, but complementary colors are those colors across from each other on the color wheel. So you're looking at colors that complement each other. I kind of did like scales, a little bit kind of like scales, fish scales. So complementary colors would be like blue and orange, or red and green, colors that are put next to each other that really complement each other and pop. You know, when your brain kind of gets stopped and you're kind of like, I'm running out of ideas, sometimes it just helps to even sit down and doodle, you know, to not even really think about it, just do things that you kind of sit in class sometimes. Shh, don't tell your teachers. But when you're sitting in class and your teacher's having you write notes, and you put little doodles next to your notes. These are these same sort of things that you can do for this. I'm going to do circles again, but I'm going to kind of build on them, kind of like bubbles. These kind of look like fish scales too. So I'm going to do one hand here for you, and then I'm going to show you what the next step is. For this one, I'm going to do triangles. So there's one hand that's an example of one hand. Now the next step is this. The next step is you can go one or two ways with this. You can color your patterns first, and then your last step could be to outline in black. Or if you're like me, outlining first and then coloring in after that. For me, doing the black outline helps me a little bit to kind of define those areas that I've built. But with a Sharpie, you could really do either or. If you were using chalk or oil pastel, something like that, you gotta be careful when you start blending over one another. You know, if you're using like a black marker, you've been there before, if you use like a black marker, go over it with yellow, it kind of smears that green color. So that's the one thing that you have to be aware of. If you're using something like a permanent marker though, like a Sharpie, you wouldn't have to worry about it because they won't smear. So my next step is actually to just now, I'm choosing to outline first. But if you were using school markers, I would suggest doing the black outline last so that yours don't smear, okay? Colored pencils wouldn't matter. Crayons, you know, they can smear a little bit with your hand if your hand kind of rubs on here. Okay, so you can see how I'm starting to, first I started by outlining the hand and now I'm going in the quadrants. I'm going to skip to one that I've actually gotten a little bit further on, this one right here. It's very similar. You can see I've got 3 hands on here and I've outlined one completely. And you can see how I've got some other designs too. So this one kind of reminds me of Spider-Man. I don't know why. Although Spider-Man doesn't have dots, but something about that one kind of. You can see how you can use shapes. On this one I use stars, up here I use moons. I don't know how well you can see that. I'm going to color in my quadrants now. And you don't have to use the same colors like you did with your pattern. So let's just say I'm going to be coloring all my stars yellow, but if I wanted to, I could have done them like multicolor. I could have done some of them yellow, some of them green, some of them blue, and then did a background a different color. That's the best part of art. There's no rules or restrictions, so you can make those choices based on what you like. Okay, so you can see how I did those yellow stars in there. I'm going to go in and do a blue background. Got to be careful with these Sharpies, they're really potent. You know how if you've worked with Sharpies before, they pretty strong scent, so make sure that you, if you're doing this for a while, that you take breaks and you ventilate because they do have a very strong scent to them, whereas school markers do not. So this being the month of February, there's different holidays in February if you wanted to do themed ones. Of course, Valentine's Day. This is kind of a cool, this could be a really cool present for somebody. So if you wanted to like make one for your boyfriend or girlfriend or mom and dad, you can make this really personal for Valentine's Day. Let's see what else is in February. Groundhog's Day. Which, by the way, if you've never seen Groundhog's Day the movie, kind of older, but I'm sure they have it at the library. You should go and see it. So you can see how all those designs now are popping once you put some color to them and you outline them. There's lots of artists that do kind of like this graphic sort of design. If you're into things like gaming or different themes, you can always do those sorts of things because they have a lot of like this kind of graphic. Nintendo or some of those characters. My daughter is currently into the Switch, so you could do things like the characters from Animal Crossing, or like the little leaves could be a pattern. You could do a themed one like that. So this is kind of tedious, meaning that it's a little bit time consuming, which, I know that there was kind of that rave for the adult coloring books. I don't know if that's still kind of a thing. I see them out still, but they sell them, but I don't know how often people are buying them like they did before. But this kind of reminds me of that because you're almost making your own graphic coloring book using your own hand and your own patterns, right? So you're just taking time to kind of just stop for a little bit and do something that everybody is capable of, which is tracing and drawing different kinds of lines and coloring. So this will be the last one here that I will color to kind of show you. Otherwise I could sit here with you all night and color this myself. I find this very soothing, and you could do this while you're watching a movie, or what I like to do personally is to listen to music when I do my artwork. When I teach my classes, I like to play music in the background. That just kind of shows you the start. You've got the outline of your hands. So step 1 is outlining your hands. Step 2 is making your boundaries. Step 3 is putting in your different designs and patterns. Step 4 is coloring or outlining, whichever one. 4 and 5 are, you can do either or based on what you're using. So again, if you're using Sharpie, I would outline in black first for the step 4. Otherwise, step 4, if you had regular school colors, I would probably color first and then put your outline last so that it doesn't bleed. Otherwise, you can color them in for your last step if you have Sharpies. Colored pencils, something like that, you could actually color first and then outline afterwards. That would work out just fine, so that you wouldn't have colored pencil over your black lines. But in the end, you get really cool designs. Of course, this is a smaller example, but you can see how when you fill up a whole page, if you chose to, you could even fill in that back area. I probably wouldn't fill it with pattern, but if you wanted to color it or do different colors, like color bursts or something, that could be really cool. You could even take watercolor and watercolor the back. So there's lots of different choices here, but these turn out really great, and I think it's a great way to express yourself. So I hope you enjoyed this project. Thank you for letting me show you how to do it, and I would love for you to join me this month and make one of these entangled hands. Have a great month. See you soon.